At Matthew 2, as you remember all this mess from last week, I show you how Matthew, for the benefit of a couple of new folks, Matthew writes from a perspective unlike John, Luke, or Mark. His perspective is he was an outcast. Remember that. He was a tax collector. He was hated by the Jews because he was a Jew who was forcing money out of the Jews to give to the Romans so they could oppress the Jews. So that's how, when you read the Bible, you'll always see, and Jesus hangs around with the sinners, the hookers, the harlots, and down at the bottom it's always the tax collectors, because they were the worst of the worst of the worst. Well, Matthew is a tax collector, and I'm not so sure the other 11 guys appreciated him being a part of the group. But Jesus called him, and he left his tax collecting stuff and followed Jesus, okay? But he's going to write from a position of, why can't I be included? Whoever made the statement that the genealogy of chapter 1 had 5 women in it, and they were all kind of questionable women, why would Matthew put that in his gospel? Well, because those questionable women were actually good people. They just had a bad life. But they were included, and that's what Matthew is writing for. He was never allowed to do anything with the Jews. No worship, no nothing. No access to God whatsoever because he was a tax collector. So, of course, he's going to write from that perspective. All right? Just keep that in the back of your mind as you read his gospel. It's in Matthew. You're going to see all kinds of examples, parables about people who were excluded and then brought back in. All right? Chapter 2. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, Magi had arrived in Jerusalem. I just had a thought. Never mind. Sorry. This brain is like a bounce house. Stuff just comes in and goes out. In Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east, and we have come to worship him." Now when Herod the king heard this, he was greatly troubled, and all of Jerusalem with him. And gathering together all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he began to inquire of the Magi where the Christ was to be born. And they said to him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written in the prophet, and you, O Bethlehem, land of Judah, are by no means the least amongst the leaders of Judah. For out of you shall come forth a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Now Herod secretly called the Magi and ascertained from them the time that the star first appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and make careful search for this child. And when you have found him, report back to me that I might come and worship him as well." Now having heard the king, they went on their way, and lo, the star which they had seen in the east carried on before them, until it came and stood over where the child was. Now when they had seen the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy, and they came to the house and saw the child with Mary his mother. And they fell down and worshipped him, and opening their treasures, they presented to him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned by God in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed afterward for their own country by a different way. Now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, "Arise, take the child, for he and his mother, and flee to Egypt, saying, Remain there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to destroy him." And he arose quickly and took the child and his mother by night, and they departed for Egypt. And it was there and stayed there until the death of Herod. That which was spoken by the Lord and of the prophet was fulfilled, saying, "Out of Egypt will I call my son." Then Herod saw that he had been tricked by the Magi, and he became very enraged. And he sent and slew all the male children who were in Bethlehem and all the environs surrounding, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he ascertained from the Magi. Then that which was spoken through Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled, saying, a voice was heard in Ramah, a great weeping and mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and she refused to be comforted, because they were no more. But when Herod was dead, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, arise and take the child and his mother, and go home to the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life have died. And he arose and took the child and his mother and came into the land of Israel. But when he heard Archelaus was reigning over Judah in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there, and being warned by God in another dream, he departed for the regions of Galilee, and came and resided in a city called Nazareth, which was spoken of through the prophets, that he should fulfill that his name he shall be called a Nazarene. All right, what do you think about that? Oh, here it is. I'll bet this isn't going to come off. Perfect. Okay, well that ain't going to work. Roger, I thought you cleaned this board every once in a while.
I sure did. For a while, you didn't want it clean.
Well, that's true.
That's probably if you read what's on it, so
All right. Yeah, it's got a PhD, and here I am cleaning forms. Something wrong with it. I'm a janitor in my own church.
That's what you got to go for mine for. Touche.
Well, in that sense, I'm going to leave that there and just... Oh, man.
But you're doing such a good job.
I know.
Hired.
All right. You know, this is not going to look good on your permanent record, Roger. Where'd my garbage can go? Excuse me a moment. Somebody took my garbage can. All right. As Uncle Harley would say, pull up your britches, boy, and get to work. Okay, I'm ready. There's a few things in this chapter. Obviously, it's the chapter that we always see at Christmas time about the Magi, and you guys know all that. Were there three of them? We don't know that. There was 3 gifts, so we assumed each one brought one. But there could have been 2 guys, there could have been 1 guy. Magi is plural, so it had to at least be 2. Could have been 8. Who knows? We don't know. So we just assume that there was 3 guys because there's 3 gifts. Well, the important of the gifts, the gold, if you remember, that would represent the kingship of Jesus as a king. The frankincense was the priest. As Paul says, since we have such a high priest in that position, then why are we not bowing before him and bringing our complaints to him, you see? And of course the myrrh, I don't know how to spell, R-H. This was the sacrifice. So in these 3 gifts, it foretells the entire purpose of Christ's coming. Isaiah predicted that there shall come forth a child. A child shall be born of a virgin, and he shall become king, and of his kingdom it will never end. That was the prophecy of Isaiah. The priest, that God would send his own priest to be for the people, that they may come before him and be forgiven. And lastly, of course, the Lamb of God. A lamb shall be slain, and that's all over the Bible, everywhere, as propitiation for the sins of the people. So the three gifts really were significant in the sense that they showed the purpose of Christ in all that he would do right here. And, how does that happen? Well, this is more testimony, if you will, of the Bible is the Word of God, or the Bible is of God, because three guys from the East that didn't know squat about the Israelites, other than maybe when they were in captivity in Babylon, these guys might have heard then of all these prophecies of Isaiah and Jeremiah and all that stuff. But then the star appeared, as was prophesied, and they said, let's follow this star and see where it goes. Well, it went back to Israel from the days of Babylon foretold, and they're listening to this and studying this, and they said, let's go see if there is a king. And they brought these gifts. Now, how they chose those gifts, we don't know. But for some reason, God let it be the gift of gold for a king, the frankincense for a priest, and the myrrh for the sacrificer. They would use myrrh to embalm the body once it was dead, so it wouldn't rot so fast. So how would they know to bring these three things for a child that was just born? Think about it a minute. And the fact that it was prophesied 1,000 years before this happened, or 900 years before it happened. And then these three guys, not Jews, not Israelites, not studied in anything Israel, came from the Babylon area over to find Christ in a little town of Bethlehem because they searched the scriptures and said, that's what that star's all about. Let's go. Think about that. What would move men to do that? Well, this is just a fanciful story, Tom. It didn't really happen. Well, it kind of did. What's that big town in France there on the river? Cologne? Is it Cologne?
That's in Germany.
That's in Germany? Well, maybe it was Germany. They built a cathedral there. That's it, where the Magi rest, the bones of the Magi rest in Cologne. And when Carol and I were over there just last month, we went into this cathedral, and they built it to be the biggest cathedral in the world at that time. And they put it in there, and to this day, you're not allowed to go in there and touch it because they got bars around it. I stepped my camera through. They have 3 coffins there, 3 sarcophaguses or whatever, made of pure gold, solid gold, and the bones of the Magi, the 3 men that visited Jesus, lay in those coffins. And they built that giant trillion square foot cathedral to house those 3 guys forever.
So they assumed there were 3 of them.
Well, they assumed there were 3 of them, but that's what there are, supposedly. Now, is all that true? I don't know. But there's 3 solid gold coffins in there, barred up, walled up, behind this incredibly huge, gorgeous, beautiful altar. And there's a second piece in there done by, I want to say Voltaire. Michelangelo did a sculpture called Descent from the Cross, where they're taking Jesus down off the cross. And that's in Milan and Florence. It goes back and forth between the 2 museums there. But there was a French guy, Voltaire or something like that. Voltaire. Well, not Voltaire the author, Voltaire the sculptor. He did another one called Descent from the Cross, except in his, he added Mary Magdalene in the background. You see her all crying and weeping and everything. It's basically the same. They're pulling Jesus down off the cross. And he added Nicodemus. Nicodemus was in his thing. So he's there as a priest overlooking. He's holding the crown of thorns. And well, anyway, that's in that cathedral at Cologne. So, but the whole thing is built for these 3 guys, believe it or not. I don't know if they're in the caskets or not, or the coffins, but they're made of pure gold. Now, that's what I want when I die. I want a pure golden thing right here in this room with the black whiteboard. and a big arrow going like this. He was a priest. He was a sacrifice, and Lord knows and he was, well, he ate at Burger King. Big arrow down there to the golden coffin. That's what I want. All right, that's the first little anomaly we have here in this chapter. There's a couple others, though. Herod sent soldiers to kill everybody from 2 years and younger. Why did he do that if Jesus was a newborn? Well, because in those days, you got to understand, the Jews would count any day or part thereof as a day in itself. So like when Jesus said, 3 days I will restore my body, I will rebuild the temple, so to speak. And he died about Friday, as if you used a Roman calendar. He died Friday about, 3 in the afternoon or something like that. They got him off the cross at about 5 when he was dead, because they had to bury him before sunset, or else their Passover would be unclean. Saturday he was in the ground, and then Sunday he arose first thing before it was even light. So why did Jesus say 3 days? Well, because Saturday was the first full day. Friday he was getting beat up in the morning and all that, and put on the cross, and then he died about 3 that afternoon, and was taken down about 5. And then Sunday he was up before the sun rose. Well, the Jews would see that as 3 days, because a full day counts, but then any part thereof would also count as a day. Get it? People always say, Tom, why do they say Jesus was in the ground 3 days and he wasn't in the ground 3 days? Well, in the Jewish mind, he was. And those Israelites. And same thing with the years. Any year or part thereof. So if I was born on December 31st at 11:59, then at 12:01 I would be 2 years old. Get it? If you're looking at the years. Any year or part thereof. So I would be 2 years old even though I'm only about 5 minutes old. That's the way the Jewish mind worked. So Herod sent the soldiers to kill anybody 2 years and younger, being that he also was a Jew, an Israelite. So that's why many children died. Some that were actually two, all the way down to the newborn infants that were just born that evening. Okay? And all that happens in accordance with the king, Herod. But it was predicted this would happen in the prophets there, again, 900 years before it did. This is the Bible. People say, well, you got to prove the Bible is true. And I said, no, I don't. The Bible proves itself. If it doesn't, then explain this to me. These weren't Jewish guys that brought these gifts. They were Babylonians. Explain this to me. There's going to be a king that is going to kill a zillion children in Ramah or Bethlehem, trying to kill a king that was foretold by the prophets. The only problem with that is it was foretold 800 years before it happened. You see what I'm saying? These little pins like this throughout the Gospels speak not just to us as a theological people longing to know God, but it speaks to the Scripture, the authenticity of the Scripture itself. And says, last chapter you saw the historical, the genealogies. And if you go back and look at history itself, no theology, just history, you'll see that all of these happened as was predicted and recorded. Well, that points to what? The authenticity of the Scriptures, right? The accuracy of the Scriptures. Now you get to the prophetic part where there's going to be, these guys are going to bring these gifts. Were there 3 of them? I don't know. Doesn't matter. They brought the 3 gifts which denote the character and purpose of Christ. And he's on the run to Egypt. Why? Because it was predicted 800 years ago that some nutjob king is going to kill all the children in Bethlehem in order to try and stop this king. How did whoever know that 800 years before it was going to happen? Lucky?
Probably not.
I've told you before, there's 278, I think, 278 exact prophecies about Jesus Christ made 1,000 years before his coming, and some more so, which out of them all, 378 of them or whatever it is, they all came true. Every single one of them happened in the life of Jesus Christ. What are the odds? Even to the point where he couldn't predict some of them. I shall call my child out of Egypt. How's a newborn baby going to arrange that? Mom, Dad, get up. We got to go to Egypt. Otherwise, that prophecy won't be true. Mom, Dad, get up. We got to go. Over and over and over again. How is that possible? Think about it. Oh, wait, Mom and Dad, make sure 3 guys show up and bring these things. Forget the Pampers. Just bring the gold, the frankincense, and the myrrh. How could Jesus have arranged that? See what I'm saying? The angel appearing to Mary in the beginning. Remember that? That was prophesying. And by a virgin she shall bring forth a child, and this child shall become king of his people, and of his kingdom there will be no end. Little Mary, 14-year-old girl. What, did she set that up somehow? Who set that up? And yet she would be the deliverer of Christ. 300 and I forget how many, 378 I think, something like that, 278, 370. Anyway, every single one of them came true according to the Gospels of Jesus Christ. Some of them he could arrange, like, and he shall come riding upon a donkey, the foal of a colt. And he shall enter the city with great palm waving and all that stuff. Well, see, Jesus is 30 years old, 33 years old. He could have set that up. All right, go get a bunch of guys, have them come out here, bring palm limbs. You guys, go get me a horse or a colt or whatever, and we'll ride into the city today and make the prophecy 800 years ago come true. He could have arranged that. How do you arrange that he shall be pierced through? And by the sword or the spear that sticks through his body shall the blood come forth and forgive us our sins. How do you do that?
He's already dead.
He's already dead. Seeing that Christ was already dead, the soldier said, well, let's just make sure. Give me your spear. Right through his chest, into his heart. And then they pull it out. Now, how did Jesus arrange that? Listen, you guys, after I die, make sure that spirit thing goes. Otherwise, Jeremiah's going to look like an idiot. Who's Jeremiah? The Romans didn't care. They weren't Jews either. They were heathens. These guys were heathens. None of them were Jewish. And yet somehow the universe worked. That all of these prophecies, 800 years, 900 years, some 1,500 years old, came true with a vengeance. God was moving mountains and nations and kings and shepherds and these guys, magi, all to prove the purpose and the character of the theophany, or God-man that would walk amongst us, just as the prophets predicted, over and over and over again. That's the strength of these chapters. We just read them and say, okay, 3 wise guys. Yeah, I got them. I got plastic ones on my front lawn. I got neon ones on my front yard. They glow out there, and they're all bringing their little gift. A little bit more to it than that. God moved the hearts of 3 Babylonian guys to come 7 million miles through the desert to Israel to find a baby in a tiny little village called Bethlehem and give them these gifts, which would denote the character of the Prince of Peace, the King of Kings, the Son of the living God. Question, did these guys really even understand what they were doing? Following a star across a desert for 1,500 miles? Think about it a minute. No 7-Elevens to stop at. No Burger Kings. Ugh. Been a miserable journey. And yet they show up, they find Mary, they give them the gifts, and then God gives them a vision and says, don't go home by way of Herod. Go another way. And they went another way. Think about that for a minute, just for a second. Let that go into your brain when you start looking at these stories going, oh, did God really do this? Historically, it's accurate. They built a cathedral for these 3 guys. See what I'm saying? There's a lot of testimony in these chapters. Lastly then, when they go, he shall be called a Nazarene. Now that's a prophecy by Jeremiah and Zechariah. Zechariah, where this king will come out of Nazareth. Well, that wasn't anybody's home. That's where they decided to stay when they got back. Why? Well, because Nazareth was kind of an uneventful place. Still is to this day. If you go there, it's a landfill, people. It's a dump. And the typography is on the mountain is like this. This is Nazareth here. This is a junkyard here. It's usually burning and flaming. And everybody throws whatever, all their trash, all their dead bodies, all their old refrigerators that don't work anymore, all down in there to just burn and let it be destroyed. Well, this tiny little village here ain't a whole lot of nothing. It never was then. It isn't now. If you go now, today, I want to go see Nazareth. Why? It's a dump. You can just go out here to Seminole County and look at the dump and say, oh, I've been to Nazareth. Why would they settle here? It wasn't like Joseph and Mary, well, wait a minute, Joseph, we got to look at the scriptures here, the scrolls, which they would have had no access to, and see where we got to live. Oh, there it is, Nazareth. Got to go to Nazareth. Joseph would say, Mary, that's a dump. You really want to go there? God moves men, God moves nations in order to tell us. He uses people that have nothing to do with Israel. He uses people that are part of Israel, but then he uses people that have nothing to do with Israel. 3 times Jesus, when as an adult in his ministry, says, oh, Katie, such faith I have never seen. Go your way, your faith has made you well. 3 times he says that. Such faith I have never seen. He's pointing to the Roman guy coming to beg mercy for his servant. 3 times Jesus says that. All 3 of them, they weren't Jews. They weren't Israelites. They were Philistines or whatever, but they weren't Jewish. See what I'm saying? And 3 times the Son of God says, such faith I have not seen in all of Israel. That's not just New Testament, folks. That's Old Testament as well. Look at the things like Naaman when he's covered in leprosy. And he came to Elijah and said, heal me. And he said, all right, go down to the Jordan River and bathe yourself 7 times, and you shall be healed. Well, Naaman was the commander of all the armies, of all the Assyrians. And Naaman said, I bow to no one. I'm not going down to that nasty little river called Jordan and bathe in it 7 times. That's just stupid. And he turned around and he was starting to ride away. And a little girl, servant of his, grabbed him and said, Lord King, mighty Naaman, if he had asked you to kill a mighty army, you would have done it. If he asked you to climb a mighty mountain, you would have done it. If he asked you to swim the ocean, you would have done it. Why can't you just be obedient in a simple thing and wash in the river? I will go with you. And then Naaman thinks about it and says, okay. So he does. He goes down, washes in the river 7 times. And when he comes up the last time, his skin is perfect. It's as soft, as smooth, and clean as a baby's behind. And he goes, well, God, this is some kind of God here. Think about it. That same man, Naaman, would return to Israel about 40 years later, 60 years later maybe, and destroy them when the Assyrians came around and destroyed the Israelites. And Naaman, who once believed in this great God, then said, well, he won't even protect his own people. He's no God at all. Of course, then he went down to Jerusalem, who was still godly. The northern kingdom was ungodly and was destroyed down there. Naaman and his entire army was destroyed. God moves men. God moves women. Tiny little girls like Mary who gave birth to Jesus. God moves nations. God uses enemies. God uses friends. Mighty men, smart men, all predicted 800 years before it happened. Now, if you go to the Old Testament and read things like Hezekiah and Zechariah, you'll see predictions of these armies coming over and over again. And then now we, on this side of history, we look back and says, well, those guys were right. These did come, and they did come, and they came, and they came. History was literally written hundreds of years before it actually happened. How is that possible? Little clairvoyance or something? No. And somehow it all ended up in this little book that we call Bible. Tom, how do you know this is true? Because I'm not an idiot. It's got to be true, because nothing like this has ever happened. Just like when those people saw Jesus. Well, we don't get to see Jesus. He's right there. Right here. Just as true, just as accurate, if you know the history behind it. This isn't just a chapter about 3 wise guys that you put on your front lawn at Christmas time. It's another proof that the Lord can use men 12 to 15, I don't know how many miles, but a long ways away, 1,500 miles away. Nothing to do with the Jews, nothing to do with Israel, and yet they come over to initiate and honor the King of Kings, born of a 14-year-old little girl who doesn't know what to make of it because she had to have the baby in the cave. No room in the inn. You think God could have at least called a Hilton or something, had a room for him. And every Christmas what do we read? And Mary gave birth to the tiny child and wrapped him in cloths. Swaddling cloths. What's a swaddling cloth? It's a rag that we use to change our oil in the car. Because that's all she had. Wrapped the baby in cloths and laid him, what, on a Posturepedic? No, in a feeding trough. You know, that would be a cute story except for the fact that a prophet 1,200 years before that happened said it would happen. Really? How do you know this is true? Because I'm not an idiot. That's my best and only answer I can give you. I don't have to prove the scriptures. All I have to do is understand them. They prove themselves. That's why you get the lineage in the front of Matthew's. That's why you get this second thing in the front of Matthew. Look who he's including. All these people that weren't Jews. And yet were included in the purpose of God. Well, who was Matthew? He was a Jew. But was he included in anything? No.
Traitor.
He was a traitor to his own people. He was hated. If he didn't have a Roman guard around him constantly, he probably would have been assassinated. Many tax collectors were. People hated them, especially when they came with their soldiers and beat you up until you paid the money that you had for taxes. Matthew understood something that a lot of us don't. That some of the nastiest people, remember Rahab in the lineage there? She was what? A hooker, a prostitute. How many of us think prostitutes are some of the holiest people to be used by God? None of us do, and they didn't in that era either. Over and over again you see in the Gospels, especially in this one, Matthew. Well, why does Jesus hang around hookers and prostitutes and harlots? Why does Jesus eat with tax collectors and nasty men? Because Matthew is one of those nasty men. And his heart longs for this king to include him in the kingdom of heaven. You can see on that day when Jesus looked at Matthew and said, "Follow me." Woo-hoo. He had to have a little woo-hoo in there somewhere. He was included. Did the other guys like it? Probably not. You know, we tend to think of the apostles as all being buddies. Yeah, we're on the Jesus team. Probably not. I got a feeling, at least at first, they hated Matthew. And Matthew was probably scared of them as well. Any one of these guys could kill me. Especially Peter, who always carried that big knife with him. Not quite a sword, but a big old fishing knife, you know, that some of these guys carried. Well, was he scared? I bet he was. I'm sure he was. If he wasn't, he was an idiot. All right, this is chapter 2. You see there's a whole lot going on here besides just 3 guys that you put on your front lawn at Christmas time. These men weren't Jews. They weren't Israelites. And yet they were all used for the purpose of God. And bringing this Son of God, this King of Kings, Prince of Peace, all of the names we call him, into our reality to say, hey, God is here, and God is here for you. Every one of you, regardless of how raggedy you are. Well, Janice, I don't know. I'm just teasing you, Janice. You're not raggedy. A little bit. Anyway, how many of us believe that? How many of us know that? How many of us live in that assurance, in that peace? This is why the historical Jesus becomes so important. Not just that he was a man, but that he was a man amongst us. He was a man amongst us. That God went through the effort not just to send a Savior, but let him be part of us, just like us, eat like us, and walk like us, and dance like us, and hurt like us, and suffer like us, and eventually die like us. The only difference is he got up and said, I'm telling you something right now, folks. This death thing, not that big a deal. In my Father's kingdom, there are incredible places you can't even imagine yet because your brain is just too small. But I'm going there to prepare a place for you, and if I do, I'll come back and take each one of you there on that day, and you shall be led forth in perfect peace. And the hills shall see you and break forth in shouts of joy. The leaves of the trees will start clapping their hands. And you will be welcomed home into the kingdom of your Father to reign with him forever and ever. What, is that all you got, Jesus? Come on. Are there Burger Kings in heaven? I need to know that. We love that rhetoric, don't we? I use it all the time in communion services, over and over, and hoping that one day somebody will say, gee, Chanter, is all that real? You know what that whole thing is? The trees and the mountains breaking forth? That was God's promise. He says to us, when he said that, that's Isaiah 55, by the way, this shall be an everlasting memorial for you until the end of time. In other words, this promise, there's no believe now, it's for a limited time. It's not for a limited time. It's for every generation until the end of time. That's the beauty of that promise. And you know what? It was Isaiah that said it about 800 years before this king ever came. Promises all came true. Every single one of them. In the character of this king, this priest, and ultimately this sacrifice. He said it was finished. And with a loud gasp, he died. What was finished? The promises were delivered. It's up to you guys now. Who was in that gang? I love that statue, that descent from the cross. You know, there's a horror in it that if you look at Jesus, how they carved him, he is just so utterly and thoroughly dead. Just a hunk of meat they're bringing off a nailed board. And yet the love in the hearts of the people taking him down, and the care and the joy. The promise, they protected the promise even though it was dead. And the resurrection, of course, that was a whole nother ballgame. Jesus came back and said what? First words out of his mouth, I told you so. Everything I told you is true, and I'm here to prove it. Thomas, my namesake, didn't believe it. Said, I don't think that's true. Unless I stick my finger in the nail holes and stick my hand in the spear holes, I'm not going to believe. How gross can you get, Tom? Really? We're eating here. Will you stop it with that stuff? The very next night, what happened? Jesus shows up. He doesn't greet the guys. He looks over to Thomas and said, Thomas, come here. Put your finger here. Put your hand here. Of course, after he did that, then he fell down and worshiped and said, it is true. No kidding. Boy, did I pick a bunch of lummoxes. All these promises made, hundreds of them, about Jesus. In the Matthew, we're going to see a lot of these promises come true. And they're all going to speak to one thing, at least in Matthew's mind, and that is inclusion in the promise. A man who had been denied ever setting foot in any church, ever sitting before God, saw a promise, saw an opportunity when Jesus said, Matthew, follow me. Probably faded right there. Somebody get him up and dust him off. Let's go. Chapter 2. Next Christmas, when you put those 3 lighty guys out in your front yard, remember there's a little bit more going on here than just that. And those lighty guys had nothing to do with Israel. Remember that. God moves men and nations and armies, whatever's necessary, and even little 14-year-old girls, in order that his purpose, his promise is delivered to us. And the Israelites didn't see it. Oh, those Israelites. Now I know what that song means. All right, that's all I got. Go away. I will see you next Sunday. Actually, I'll see you in about 20 minutes when we start church. And then I'll see you next Sunday.